So this video is about faith and how faith relates to two other attitudes, belief and confidence. So this is actually a summary of one of my papers. So let's start by thinking about a puzzle that arises when we think about the relationship between faith and reason. And specifically, I think we can frame this as an argument against the rationality of faith. So here's how the argument might go. Premise one says faith goes beyond the evidence. And it does seem like faith is sort of steadfast, even in light of counter evidence. So in that sense, it kind of goes beyond the evidence. Premise two says if faith goes beyond the evidence, then faith is irrational. Rational attitudes are sensitive to evidence. So if faith goes beyond the evidence, this is at least some reason to think that faith is irrational. Therefore, faith is irrational. So I want to look at a way we might respond to this argument by denying premise two. So basically, this is a way that we might explain how faith could go beyond the evidence, but that doesn't mean that faith is irrational. And a couple things to note about faith. Faith isn't just a religious thing. I think a lot of times when we hear the word faith, we think about faith in God, but we have, faith in other people. We have faith in democracy. We have faith in recycling. So faith isn't limited to just the realm of religion. And in fact, faith actually seems like an essential part of a flourishing life. So when you think about our long-term commitments, like a marriage commitment or a commitment to finishing a degree or picking up a new instrument, faith is required. You have to have faith in your spouse. You have to have faith in yourself. You have to have faith in the people helping you. So faith isn't just a thing that is important in religious context, but it actually is part of what helps us maintain our commitments over time. So I want to look at ways we might say faith just isn't this irrational thing, but it still goes beyond the evidence and helps us to maintain these commitments. So to do that, I want to step back and look at two other attitudes. The first is the attitude of belief. Believing something is taking it to be the case or regarding it as true. And most epistemologists think that there are basically three belief-like attitudes. You could believe something, so I believe 1 + 1 = 2. You could withhold belief on something, so I withhold belief that there's an even number of stars. This is also called agnosticism. A lot of people associate agnosticism with just lacking belief in God, but you could be agnostic about anything. So I'm agnostic about whether there's an even number of stars. And you can also disbelieve things. So I disbelieve that it's 75 degrees at the North Pole. I disbelieve 1 + 1 = 3. And note that belief does not come in degrees. And this is going to be important when we contrast it with the other attitude that we're going to talk about. So you either believe something or you don't. But there's another attitude, confidence. Confidence is an attitude that represents sort of how likely or how probable something is. And philosophers actually often call this credence, but we're just going to stick to confidence today just to kind of make it simpler. But look, you could be 100% confident in something, so you're maximally confident that it's true. You could be 0%, where you're maximally confident that it's false, and then kind of all the way, all these confidence levels in between, right? So I'm pretty close to 100% sure 1 + 1 = 2. I'm 90% sure that it will rain tomorrow, especially, think like if the forecast predicted a 90% chance of rain. I'm 50% sure that a coin will land heads. So confidence, unlike belief, it does come in degrees. There's a lot of confidence levels we could have, and you could actually believe two things, but be more confident in one than the other. So I believe 1 + 1 = 2, and I believe it will rain tomorrow, but I'm more confident that 1 + 1 = 2 than that it will rain tomorrow. So what's notable about belief and confidence is that evidence can change our confidence levels without changing our beliefs. And there's sort of two main ways this can go. The first is that evidence increases our confidence in something, but it doesn't cause us to believe that thing. So let's say you bought a lottery ticket. You might be pretty confident your ticket will lose. Like if there's 100 tickets, you should be 99% sure your ticket lost. But a lot of philosophers think you aren't required to believe that your ticket lost. There's still a live possibility that it won. So your confidence in that you're a loser is high, but you don't believe you're a loser. What if I did a survey and I found out that 90% of Ryerson students love the Raptors? Let's just say I did that. And then I meet a random Ryerson student. So what should I think about whether they like the Raptors or not? I think it's natural to think I should increase my confidence that they like the Raptors when I find out they're a Ryerson student. 90% of Ryerson students love the Raptors, but I don't know if this gives me a reason to believe that that student in particular loves the Raptors. Just because there's a statistic doesn't mean that that student wouldn't be an exception to it. So evidence increases confidence in those cases, but doesn't cause us to form a belief. In other cases, evidence can decrease our confidence in something, but doesn't cause us to give up a belief. So here's a really basic example. If I checked the weather yesterday and it said there's a 90% chance of rain, then I might believe and have a 90% confidence that it will rain tomorrow. And then if I check it again today and it's updated and it says it's only an 80% chance of rain, I'd still believe that it was going to rain tomorrow, but my confidence would be a little bit lower. In a little bit more of a serious case, let's say your brother is accused of a crime, and before he's accused, you believe and you're very confident he would never murder anyone. And he's accused of this crime, and you start getting some evidence that he committed this crime. It's not decisive evidence. It's not evidence that proves he did it, but the evidence does make you a little bit less confident that he is innocent. And it could even make you a good bit less confident that he's innocent. But I think it's natural to think until you have really, really good evidence that he's innocent, even if your confidence goes down some, you can still continue to believe that your brother is innocent. So these are cases where evidence decreases our confidence in something, but doesn't force us to give up one of our beliefs. So you might say, okay, that's all well and good. There's belief and confidence, and sometimes evidence changes confidence but doesn't change belief. But what does this have to do with faith? Like, why are we even talking about this? And this kind of brings me to the main thesis, the main point of this video. And the main idea is that faith is more like belief than it's like confidence. So why think that? Why think that faith is similar to belief in this way? Well, notice that in our examples, the belief remains steadfast, but the confidence moves up and moves down. Sometimes the confidence moves up and you withhold belief. You don't form a belief. Sometimes the confidence moves down, but you keep having that belief. And this suggests that belief is in some sense a steadfast attitude, but confidence is sensitive to kind of minor changes in evidence, and we get a little bit of evidence, we should be a little more confident. So confidence sort of tightly tracks our evidence. But beliefs, on the other hand, let us take a stand on what we think is true. So I think my brother is innocent. I think my brother would not have committed this crime. I can take a stand on that, even if my confidence moves down as there's some evidence that he actually did the crime. Again, not proof, but evidence. So I want to look at examples of how this kind of picture might apply to faith and might show how faith could be rational, but in some sense go beyond the evidence. So here's an example of a case where you might get evidence that moves your confidence up, but doesn't give you faith. If I do a study and I find out that 90% of Ryerson students are good at keeping secrets, and then I meet a random person on the street and find out they're a Ryerson student, I should raise my confidence that they'll keep my secret, but it doesn't seem like a good basis for me to have faith that they'll keep a secret, and especially not take a risk on them and tell them something really important. So just because I have this statistic, that doesn't seem to give me faith, even though it gives me confidence. Here's another statistic, another example, but it goes in the opposite direction. So let's say, I'm engaged, I'm about to be married, and I have faith that my spouse and I will be faithful to each other. And then I learn that 50% of marriages end in divorce. So this might be a case where my confidence that my spouse and I will be faithful to each other would go down, but I don't think this requires me to give up my faith. I can continue to rationally have faith in my spouse and in myself in our marriage. So those are examples of non-religious faith. And now let's talk about examples of religious faith. So maybe Sarah has faith that a miracle occurred, that God did a miracle. But then she learns about Hume's argument against miracles. And Hume gives an argument that a miracle occurring is actually very unlikely. Sarah might decrease her confidence that a miracle occurred, but she doesn't have to give up her faith. Her faith can continue to remain steadfast, even in light of that counter evidence. Um, let's say another person, John. John has faith that God is powerful and that God is good. But John keeps experiencing evil in the world. And he's like, if God is powerful, why doesn't God prevent this evil if God's good? So it's puzzling. But each experience of evil could lower John's confidence that God is powerful and good, but it doesn't force John to give up his faith. So, in conclusion, sometimes evidence chips away at our confidence. It makes us less confident in something. But evidence doesn't always require us to give up our faith, especially if that evidence isn't proof that our faith is irrational. And I want to suggest that this is one way that faith could be rational, but it could still go beyond the evidence. It could still remain steadfast, even in light of counter evidence. So we don't have to be blown around by the winds of counter evidence. Maybe our confidence will go down, but faith can kind of keep us rooted and keep us steadfast. Remember, faith is more like belief, the steadfast attitude. So what we've covered today, we've talked about the problem of faith and reason. Then we've talked about belief and confidence and why evidence can change our confidence without changing our beliefs. Then we looked at some reasons to think that faith is more like belief than it is like confidence, and talked about how this enables rational faith to go beyond the evidence.